Awesome, we're live. So that was a good game. There's some construction to go through. I'll go through that, but first off, let us just enjoy that the Jazz won a game that they should have won, but they pulled out and they've had some struggles with that so far this season. They've won 2 in a row now, so I guess the Jazz officially have their first winning streak. Unless you count a winning streak as one, then that's boring. But so, that's great news. The Jazz beat the Pistons. They started off strong. I loved seeing Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley, how they started off strong and they stayed hot pretty much the entire game. I saw a comment, no video. Can you see my video? It's in the middle of the stream, but it's working on my end. So comment if you can't see it, and I'll see if I can fix it. But until then, I'll keep going. Jazz victory. Okay, awesome. Thanks. Hopefully everyone can see my video now, but looks like it's good. So there's 3 key stats I want to focus on right now. 2 of them are positive and 1 is constructive that the Jazz really need to focus on. It's something that they've had struggles with all year. The first key stat, you can probably see from the thumbnail, it's about Conley and Donovan Mitchell. They combined for 50 points this game. Started off hot, stayed hot, as I said. So that's awesome. Second stat is the rebounds. I think Favors had 14 and Gobert had 20. And compared to the Pistons, the Jazz had 64 rebounds and the Pistons had 39, which is where I think the Jazz won the game. It's like if you get that many more rebounds than the other team, that means you have that many more possessions than the other team. The third stat is something that has been concerning, and I think it's the reason why the Jazz had a slow third quarter and why, even though they went off on a hot start in the first quarter, why it stayed close and it was almost a nail biter at the end. I wouldn't say it was. I was pretty confident the Jazz would win, but there were times where I thought they might lose the lead, and that's in the turnovers. The Jazz had 16 turnovers compared to the Pistons 8. And so 16 turnovers is way too many. The Jazz shouldn't be turning the ball over that many times. Also, the Pistons only turned it over 8 times, which means the Jazz weren't forcing turnovers. They weren't forcing them into sticky situations to cough the ball up as often as they should have. So that stat is both offense and defense problems, but I don't want to dwell on that too much. It's a Jazz win. I feel like I talk about Jazz losses most of the time, and I don't want to be the doom and gloom guy. So going forward, what can we learn from this game? And is this going to help energize the Jazz as they have a pretty good stretch of games of teams that they definitely should beat? And so I'm hoping this can kind of kick off a winning streak for the Jazz. Obviously, we expected them to beat the Pistons. It was a little close. It got messy in the third quarter. But one positive thing that I noticed is since Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley as well, but I'm going to focus on Donovan Mitchell here, since he got off hot, that kind of energized the team. And I noticed that even in the third quarter when they made some sloppy plays on defense and some sloppy plays on offense, I noticed that the team, they had that energy. On defense, they had an extra boost in their step. And obviously the Pistons, they do have some decent players. Blake Griffin is, a lot of people think he's washed up, but he's a lot better than most people think he is. And Jeremy Grant was awesome tonight. So sometimes the Pistons get hot. Luckily, it was just for a quarter of this game, so the Jazz still pulled it out. So that's one thing that I'm hoping to see more from the Jazz is Conley coming out, or not Conley, Mitchell. It would be nice if Conley was hot as well, but Mitchell coming out aggressive and scoring early and then continuing that trend through the game. And I'm hoping that will fix a lot of their issues as far as energy goes, both on offense and defense. Because if you get Mitchell scoring easy buckets on the offensive end, it's a little easier for everyone else. Both they take a rest on offense, but also they're more excited and more engaged in the game. So I'll jump over to the comments section real quick. So comment what your thoughts are, any questions, and I'll discuss them. But real quick, right before we started streaming, I checked our subscriber count. We're at 197. So we're 3 away from getting 200. So help us get to 200. A great way is if you're already subscribed, like this video. It helps it show up more often so new people can hop on the video while I'm streaming here. So don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And I'm really hoping we can get to that 200 mark here pretty soon in the next hour or so. But let me catch up on the chat. I've been going on my spiel, so let's see what's going on here. The Jazz did have a slow third quarter. That was concerning as I was keeping track of everything. It reminded me of which game was it where they came out hot and then just blew up in the second half. But I was really worried about that for a second, but the Jazz pulled it out. They were awesome. And just with the eye test, even though the stats did not look great in the third quarter, the eye test gave me confidence that the team was still there. It's just the ball wasn't falling. And they just, some Detroit players got hot and it made it a little tougher on them on defense. But stuff to learn. I don't think it's anything huge the third quarter, and especially since they won the game. So I'm happy about that. Jeremy Grant, a lot of people have been talking about him. He has been like one of the best signings of the offseason, and that's probably why Detroit is getting off to a slow start. Not only did they lose another like shot maker, but they lost a huge defensive asset for them. So I'm excited to see what his career looks like. The Pistons, they have some pieces that in the next few years, if they play their cards right, they might actually have a pretty good team. Because they have enough assets that they can trade. I'm guessing they're looking to trade Blake Griffin. If they trade him, if let's say he goes on a streak where he's just hot this season, they might be able to get quite a bit in return for Blake Griffin, and then surround Jeremy Grant with more young assets, more talent. And I wouldn't be surprised if in 2-3 years the Pistons can build a team with Jeremy Grant as a main piece on that team. I'm happy that the Jazz, they played well. They had energy. It was like a breath of fresh air watching the Jazz game tonight. I know the Pistons, they're not a good team right now, but seeing them play like that against a good team is awesome because I know they played the Spurs, and the Spurs are better than the Pistons, but when I watched them play the Spurs, even though it was a blowout, there was just a lot of sloppy, lazy play. So they still have the turnover issue, but they're fixing the energy issue. So I'm excited for the Jazz moving forward, especially now that they can have a few easier games to figure out who they really are. Yeah, Donovan, he shot 50% from the field, Donovan Mitchell, so that was awesome. It was, as a team, Jazz shot about 42% from the field, I think just under 42%, which I'd like to bring that up more to mid-40s, high 40s. Like 50% is too much to ask, but that's always like the cutoff versus of if you're a player, if you had 50% or higher, you had a good night unless you just shot like 30 shots, then it's understandable to be a little under 50%. But Donovan Mitchell, he was right at 50%. Mike Conley was efficient. Jordan Clarkson was efficient. Joe Ingles, I think he was right around 50%. He didn't shoot very much, so there's that. But on the opposite end, it was like the Jazz had a group of players that were on tonight and other players that were off. Like Gobert, I think he was 1 for 6, and he was like, if I remember correctly, like 2 for 7 from the free throw line. So he got 20 boards, but he didn't put up the points tonight. So I'm not concerned about that, but I am happy to see that Donovan Mitchell, like, he's not shooting in the 38 percentile right there, right? The Knicks, was it the Knicks game that they gave up in the second half? I was concerned about that here. Luckily, it didn't happen. So the James H., he said the first quarter really took most of the game away from the Pistons. I love seeing that when that's really the beauty of starting off hot. A lot of times you see even teams with superstars, they'll come out, they'll kind of walk through the first 2.5 quarters. Later in the third quarter, you see them try. Maybe right at the end of the second quarter, they try, and then they just pick it up in the fourth quarter. I like seeing the Jazz that they came out tonight, even though they knew it was supposed to be an easy game, which it was for parts and it wasn't for parts, but seeing that they came out with that energy and came out on fire, had that energy, like Donovan shot consistently. So, and that shows that even though they had a subpar second and fourth quarter and a pretty bad third quarter, that first quarter coming out hot is huge for them. And so I'm hoping the Jazz take that strategy and almost like try to front load their efforts, because it's easier to keep a lead than to try to catch up. So that's exciting to see. Um, uh, do I think Jordan Clarkson makes Sixth Man of the Year? I think I got this question on a stream a while ago, but I think he's definitely in the conversation. I haven't been following other Sixth Man of the Year candidates. Normally, that's something that those candidates start popping up later in the season, because a lot of times Sixth Man of the Year are younger players that you don't really have your eye on until you realize, oh shoot, this guy's averaging like 16 and 7 off the bench, which is insane. But right now, I think everyone has Jordan Clarkson number one for Sixth Man of the Year. I can't like Lou Williams is always in the conversation. He's had a rough year this year so far, so I'm imagining he's front runner. I hope he gets it. I think he can get it, but if he doesn't, I think he'll at least get first place votes for it. Um, he's been a huge part of the Jazz. This year he's a huge spark off the bench offensively, and he's one of those players that I haven't had many complaints about so far this season. I don't think he's had many super plays. Obviously, he's not the strongest defender, but him being there on offense is a huge relief for a lot of other players, especially now that I feel like last season he had to have the ball in his hands. This season, I'm seeing him a lot just kind of sitting in the corner, being quiet until the defense gets off of him. The Donovan Mitchell, I think it was in the fourth quarter, had a really nice pass to him in the corner where he sucked the defense in by just dribbling around the court for a little bit, stepped into the paint, his man stepped over, and Jordan Clarkson got an open three. So I'm excited about him. I haven't had any complaints. I think he should be a front runner for Sixth Man of the Year. Yeah, there were some. I think I saw. So Jordan Clarkson, I don't think it's going to be anything major as far as injury wise. I saw Royce O'Neal. He got bumped up a little bit. He came back and played. So I'm not from what I'm seeing, I don't think any major injuries came out of this game. Maybe since the games are more compact, you might see some players sit games that might be time for the Jazz to look at. Maybe doing some load management on their players, since this is it's a more compressed season, meaning there's more games in less amount of time, even though there's less games overall, but just, you know what I mean? Like an average week has more games. So I'd be okay if the Jazz, if they just pick one, like you need Gobert and Mitchell out there every night. If it's an easy game that doesn't matter towards the end of the season, I'm okay with seeing one of those two players. But it might be a good idea once the Jazz get on a rhythm just to pick a piece and let him rest or limit his minutes severely, whether that be Joe Ingles or Jordan Clarkson, or mainly bench pieces. And since the Jazz have a really deep bench, you could do that for a lot of the starters and switch them in and out. So I don't know if that's Quinn Snyder's style, but I'd be interested to see if they do something like that in order to preserve players like Jordan Clarkson, where if he gets out for a majority of the season, that would be brutal. Corbin Brown, who do you have to win the NBA championship? Coming into the season, I said Lakers hands down. The Lakers still are looking like the front runner. They haven't had as solid of a start as most people would expect. So I still think the Lakers are the favorite to come out of the West. Out of the East, there's a lot of good teams. I don't think the Bucks have it this year. They haven't started off strong, and I just feel like their team isn't as good as it has been in years past. That ever since they lost. And I'm blanking on his name, the point guard that left to the Pacers in free agency, Malcolm Brogdon. Yeah. Ever since they lost him, I feel like they lost a little bit of a step. They do have Drew Holiday back, so maybe that will take. I don't think the Bucks are coming out of the East. I don't think the Heat are going to make it to the finals again, but then again, everyone underestimated them last year. I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing a Celtics-Lakers matchup. I know the Celtics aren't looking like the best team in the world right now, but I think Kemba Walker is still out. I think this might be the Celtics' year. Jason Tatum has had his coming out party last year. Jaylen Brown is looking awesome. So between the Celtics and Lakers, I might actually pick the Celtics. I think the Celtics have more talent, even though the Lakers have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, which it's tough to beat them. So that would be my prediction right now, is probably a Celtics-Lakers, which would be historic, but also kind of boring because those two teams have 40% of the NBA titles in NBA history, which sucks. But that would be my prediction at this point. It's tough to tell. There's a lot of talent in the East, and the Lakers are definitely the favorite, but they have slipped up. They lost twice to the Spurs, so I don't know. We'll see. But that's it. That's been the game. The Jazz won by 10, 96-86. I think we'll wrap this up. Don't forget to like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel. We do a post-game review after every Jazz game. Now that the semester's starting up, we're going to try to keep that up, but maybe some slower games that aren't as important we'll take a day off if it's a big test or something. But we'll make sure to keep putting out the content every Saturday. We try to put out something. Sometimes we do 2 videos in a weekend, like we did this weekend. So make sure to subscribe and like. Thank you for all the comments. It's been great, and thanks for tuning in. And we'll catch up with you next time. Bye.